You're listening to episode 53 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Kailen Krame joins us to speak about her book, Put It in Perspective, A Teen's Guide to Sanity. When you were 16, did you want to change the world? Or maybe your goals were more modest, and you limited yourself to helping your peers through the difficulties you yourself were experiencing. But did you go so far as to write a book to make a difference? Today's guest, moved by her own challenges and seeing the suffering of those around her, chose to do just that. Kailen Krame is currently completing undergraduate studies at the University of Florida and is pursuing a major in psychology. Motivated by her own personal struggles, she set out at age 16 to write a book that would help fellow teenagers cope with the stresses of daily life. Her goal is to inspire adolescents everywhere to maintain a positive outlook and change their lives for the better. Our guest today is Kailen Krame. Kailen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very grateful to your father, Bill, for introducing us virtually through a card about our topic today, which is your book, Put It in Perspective, A Teen's Guide to Sanity. But before we get into that, I'd like to ask you to just tell us a little bit about your background. Who are you?
Sure. Well, I am just entering my third year of undergraduate study at the University of Florida, where I'm studying psychology. I'm 20 years old, and about 4 years ago is when I set out on this journey to write my book. It just got published about a year ago. So it was a long process, but definitely a great one. I learned a lot. And, throughout this journey, I've had the opportunity to speak at a local college and some local high schools about the topic of my book because the target audience is young adults and teenagers. So that's pretty much what I'm really passionate about. Is I'm studying psychology, and I really love the opportunity to be able to introduce mindfulness into that and really just spread the message with other people, not just my contemporaries, but really anybody of any age group I've had the opportunity to speak with. It's just really great to have these conversations, and I'm excited to see where that leads.
Wonderful. Thank you for that background. And let's talk a little bit about mindfulness itself. How did you first encounter that? What was your introduction?
Well, you mentioned my father setting us up. So both my parents were really influential. They meditated for as long as I can remember. And always, our dinner conversations, I have an older sister too. We're a very close family. And, our dinner conversations weren't necessarily the typical, how was your day, type of family conversations. We really would have these, deep conversations from a young age about what was really important in life. And so that kind of laid the groundwork for when I would ultimately discover mindfulness on my own. So, it was definitely a process. When I was younger, if I was stressed out, my parents would recommend that I listen to a tape or I just take time out for myself. But, really the defining moment for me where I began the journey on my own, and really despite, my parents' influence, what resonated with me, and this was also the inspiration of what helped me write my book, was my sophomore year of high school. I was really stressed out and was kind of doing everything as a means to an end, going about everything on autopilot, so not being mindful. And at this point, I didn't know what mindfulness was, specifically as a practice. And my dad gave me a book to read about living in the present moment and being mindful. And it really just changed my entire perspective from that moment on. It was definitely a process, a journey. It's not like it from that moment on, I lived mindfully and that was it. And I never had any sort of sources of stress or any problems. But that was really the turning point for me, where I realized that the most important thing that you can do for yourself, and really the best way to live a meaningful life, is to be here now. It really resonated with me that the only moment that there is for us to do anything, for anything to be felt, to experience life, is right now. So not worrying about the future, not regretting things in the past. And so this one book that I read when I was about 15 really pointed that out to me. And from that moment, it really started my personal journey with the practice and really understanding this perspective and way of living life.
What was the book?
It was Practicing the Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
So tell us a little bit about your own book. What prompted you to write it? What's the backstory of that?
Sure. So I talk about this in the introduction to my book because I do like to give my readers, a point of reference. They can relate, what really got me started. So I start out by explaining I was on family vacation my sophomore year of high school. Everything should have been beautiful and perfect. I was, very relaxed in a great environment with my family. And I was feeling happy, but then, a pang washed over me. And I realized that feeling of happiness, of just being genuinely happy, I hadn't felt that way in a very long time. I hadn't been present in a very long time. And again, like I said, I didn't really understand, before that, what mindfulness was and, what being present versus not present was, until that moment where I was very present and realized that that was a foreign feeling to me. I hadn't felt that way in a while. So my dad gave me the book, and that kind of elucidated everything for me. And the next couple of months at school, because, the source of stress that I really had was academic and social and the typical things that teenagers go through. Looking back, none of them were too difficult, but compiled together and, not having an appropriate skill set for being able to deal with them just kind of really made me, like I said, living on autopilot, just kind of going through the motions, very caught up in stress. And so the next few months, once I was able to have this moment of clarity and take a step back, I really worked on implementing, mindfulness, really just being present. And it completely changed everything. I was no longer stressed and living on autopilot. Of course, I had stressful situations, but the way that I dealt with them was completely different than I had before. I didn't catastrophize things. I really just accepted them, as they were. And that completely changed the way that I dealt with situations and interacted with other people. And so experiencing this change, this huge shift in perspective firsthand, my next thought was, why shouldn't my friends be able to benefit from this practice and from this lifestyle change like I did? Because I'd look around, at all my friends and I'd see them going through the same exact thing. And once I was able to realize what was going on, I felt very strongly that, being stressed out and just going through the motions shouldn't just be, par for the course in the teenage years. It just shouldn't be something that we accept. And so I knew that, I've always been passionate about writing and I've always been passionate about helping people. And so I knew in that moment when I had this thought that I had to write a book specifically for the teenage audience, because, there are books out there for teenagers, but none to my knowledge had been written by, their peer, by someone their age who was going through it and could really relate. So I knew in my heart that I just had to write a book to really connect with others my age who were going through similar situations.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And tell us a little bit about the book itself. What's in there?
Sure. So I'm definitely by no means a master or an expert on mindfulness. And the book itself, it's an introductory book. So it's really for people to get their feet wet if they've never encountered these topics before. It's an adapted version so that teenagers or really anybody who's never experienced mindfulness, meditation, these types of topics, for them to kind of get an idea, an introductory version of what this is really about. Basically, what I talk about, I start, like I said, with my story, and it's really just, it's a conversation. It's a very, casual tone, just trying to talk to people with, anecdotes, a lot of stories from my own life to kind of get teenagers, adults, whoever may be reading it, to kind of just understand that these are all things that we go through, whatever it may be, and that being present and understanding that we have control over what is happening and even if the circumstances in our life we can't control, we can control how we respond to them and what our view is on them. So really that's why it's called Put It in Perspective, because I really, the most profound realization that I came to was everything that we experience in life and the life that we, create for ourselves is really all a matter of perspective. Everyone may experience the same type of situation, but what enables us to overcome it or, on the other side of that, to be deeply affected by it is a matter of how we view it. And so going along with this, I break my book down into 5 qualities of, I call them maintaining sanity, because the longer title of my book is Put in Perspective, A Teen's Guide to Sanity. Again, trying to keep it lighthearted, how to, stay sane throughout the teenage years. And so the 5 qualities for maintaining sanity are acceptance, compassion, selfishness, resilience, and fearlessness. So that's the main chunk of my book. And I obviously delve specifically into all those things because through my research, I found that those were the key characteristics that really, if nothing else, those were crucial to changing one's perspective. I introduce mindfulness not necessarily in an overt way, but the way that I talk about these characteristics, it's really about, taking a step back and trying to live mindfully and treat yourself with compassion in others. And in each of the 5 characteristics, in themselves, there's a lot to say about all of them. But that's really, the short version, that's what's included in my book.
I would think the parents of teens might also be interested in taking a look because that might give a little bit of insight into what's going on, because for some of us, it's been a while since the teen years.
Well, that's the thing. I decided when I wrote it that I was going to target the teenage and young adult audience because that was the perspective that I was coming from. So that's what I could, the experience that I could speak to. But it certainly is equally as much for parents, to either read themselves, to give to their children. I've heard from many people in, the middle age group saying that, it was even helpful for them. They just simply substituted, for instance, if I use an example of taking the SATs, they would substitute something that was meaningful for them. So it's less about the specific story and more about the message behind it. But yeah, when I spoke at one of my speaking engagements, a large part of the audience was parents. And so they were asking about, how they could introduce this to their teenagers. Because also when a young person is going through stressful situations and haven't ever been exposed to mindfulness or these types of practices before, they're not necessarily inclined to break away from the routine that they have going and try to really address the problem. So that's why it's also nice for, for a parent here to step in and say, I really think that you could benefit from something like this. So it's definitely a great opportunity, whatever the reason that someone stumbles upon it, there's definitely something in there for everyone.
And what kind of feedback have you received so far?
Great feedback. Again, I've had the opportunity to speak with people they were intimate speaking engagements. So everyone in the audience had read the book and it was a really nice conversation. And again, everyone has really enjoyed it from the older crowd, whether it be that they gave it to their kids or their grandkids even, and said that they even benefited from it, and that they couldn't wait to share it with their grandkids, their children, and that they substituted their own circumstances into the little anecdotes that I have. So that was great feedback to know that it was a broad audience, but also, my peers, I had great feedback. What I heard, which was great, to hear, was that so many people said, well, of course, this is how things should be. But nevertheless, I don't implement this into my life. So it's so great that you put it down on paper in a very succinct and straightforward way, because when we're going about our daily lives, yes, we may know this in some deep, back of our minds, but it's really great to have put into words and as a reminder. So that was great feedback for me to have from people my age. Someone that I know from my university even said we have a freshman required course called What is the Good Life that talks about not really mindfulness, but it's kind of just a guide for helping freshmen integrate into college life. And one of them said that, this would be the perfect tool for everyone coming into college to have during the transition period, which was, a great thing for me to hear, because that is exactly what I intended it to be for, to really just help people, in their transitioning periods, have something to remind them of what's important and how to properly have a handle on things regardless of what might come up. So overall, the feedback has been great. A lot of people have also said, specifically from the older crowd, that they wish they had something like this when they were growing up, which was really touching to me because, I was so fortunate to find these practices on my own or, through parental intervention when I was young. I'm 20, but I found it in my teenage years. And many people don't find, these practices and these life perspectives until way later in life after they've surmounted great obstacles or gone through a lot. So, that's really why I wanted to do this, because I didn't want people to say, oh, why didn't I discover this sooner? I really want to touch, the younger audiences so that they have a strong skill set and really develop healthy habits for living life, whatever comes their way as they get older. It's been really great.
Sound like some wonderful aspirations. And I'm wondering, what else would you like to share with the listeners? What are some other hopes that you may have about this book and just about the practice?
Yeah, well, again, I'm very passionate about not even just reaching young people, reaching really anybody who might be able to benefit. So, that's my hope for this book. It never was about doing something, because obviously, it's an accomplishment to write a book at such a young age, but not once was it for that purpose. It really was so that I could spread the message and help people. And so that's what I just really hope to continue doing through word of mouth, through publicity, in terms of I have a Facebook page that I just share the book and updates with. But again, being a young person, being in college, my more immediate goal is really about bringing this to the high school and college arena. There's many movements now, to integrate mindfulness into various realms of society, whether it be business or medicine. But what I've really honed in on and what I've really researched is bringing it into education, which is now becoming a huge movement. And it's amazing what a lot of institutions have started. And I've been lucky enough to work with one of them, actually, doing research for them. And so that's really what I'm passionate about, is I think that educational institutions, whether it be high school, college, they're in the unique position to really shape the minds of young people. And, education is no longer just about putting facts into people's minds and, teaching them basic skills of math or writing. But it's really become a lot more holistic in educating the whole person and preparing them for the world ahead of them. And so that's what I really hope to do, whatever field I go into, whatever research opportunities I'm afforded, is really just being able to spread the message about how important these practices are at pointing out to people that they don't have to stand in their own way, that they can really accomplish anything if they really just accept, meet things with acceptance rather than resistance, and just really are present. And teaching these skills, rather than so much of things that we don't do stem from fear, fear of failure, which comes from not being present because you're worried about a future outcome or you're afraid of, a past mistake. And these are things that, everyone goes through. And so if we learn, from a young age or even in the, the transformative years, how to combat this and how to really address life situations head on and have, this amazing skill set, I think we will be living in a much better world, with people who are a lot more resilient and able to work compassionately with other people and really just have a great skill set and a great whole person to whatever their endeavors are. If I had one thing, I guess, that I'd like to, share with whoever's listening, it's really just the passion that I have for bringing this to the next generation, because I do think that these practices will make a world of a difference in, our future leaders and in the path that our society follows. So that's really, what I've just been passionate about and what I hope to continue working on, whatever, my path leads.
Thank you, Kailen. Completely agree with that. And for those who are listening, you can check out more of what Kailen's doing on her WordPress site, putitinperspective.wordpress.com. And of course, that will be linked on the episode page for this episode, as will the book itself, Put It in Perspective, A Teen's Guide to Sanity. Our guest today, Kailen Krame. Kailen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.